Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our regular council meeting on Monday, June 23rd to order. I'm Mayor Cliff McNeil-Smith, colleagues at council. To my far left, Councillor Richard Novick, Councillor Terry O'Keefe, Councillor Chad Rintoul. To my far right, Councillor Steve Duck, Councillor Sarah Duncan, and Councillor Scott Garnett. Good evening to members of staff. Staff will be introduced if they are speaking this evening, which they will. To introduce reports and answer questions, and good evening to members of the public, both here in the gallery at the town and to those who may be watching the live webcast. I want to begin by respectfully acknowledging that our meeting this evening, and indeed the entire town of Sydney, is in the territory of the Wasanich people, today known under 5 nations, the Sayot Nation, the Sartlip Nation, the Sycam Nation, the Pakwitcha Nation, and the Malahat Nation, and we express our gratitude for their stewardship of these lands and waters for millennia, and appreciate the importance of us working together for the future of everyone living on the peninsula. In turning to approval of the agenda, there are some additions and one change before seeking a motion. The additions are, since the agenda was published, we've received 2 items of correspondence from the same individual, but I want to acknowledge those as going on to the agenda. They will be a formal part of the agenda tonight and in the minutes. And the first is from Daniel Day. It was received on June 18th, and a reply from staff was provided on June the 19th. And then a second letter from the same individual was received on June 19th and is on the agenda this evening. That's the only addition. The one change I would like to make is under item 4D, which is a presentation on tenant assistance for redevelopment at 9972 3rd Street. There's a presentation there on the agenda, and then a little further along under staff reports, item 13A, is the application of tenant assistance policy to the development, and we will be hearing from staff, and then council will be discussing it. They're 2 separate items in different places on the agenda, but what I would like to do is to move item 13A to immediately follow item 4D1.
So moved.
And just before seeking a mover, I just want to note that those who have seen the agenda will note that we don't have any items under correspondence for council to discuss this evening, but there are many items under correspondence for information, which we are only receiving on our agenda this evening, unless a member of council in a moment advises that they would like to raise that. But I want to speak to 2 sets of the correspondence. There are 9 emails under 15.1 regarding the proposed development at 9972 3rd Street. Some of those are under the agenda item themselves, but they're not for discussion tonight if they're not dealing with the tenant assistance policy. And the reason we're placing them under correspondence for information is that development application will be coming to a future council meeting and will be considered. So in essence, we're moving those items that have been received. Appreciate that the public does want to express their views, but they will be moved to when that item comes onto the agenda. And similarly with item 15.2, we've received 6 emails regarding the proposed development at 9989 and 9991 5th Street at Henry. And again, we won't be discussing those this evening. That application will come forward at a future meeting. And all of those items of correspondence, as some that we've received preceding tonight, before this evening, or that come before the council meeting, will go to that agenda. With that, I would seek a mover and seconder to approve the agenda with the addition and change just mentioned.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. I'm going to take a moment now to talk about public participation opportunities this evening. And there are 4 opportunities, and I'm going to start with the last one, the one that will be 4th. And that is, we have a presentation from the applicants regarding the redevelopment of 9972 3rd Street. There won't be an opportunity, this is an opportunity for the applicant to present to council, and so it's considered under public participation. but members of the public won't be speaking at that time if they wish to address that item. The third item is a public hearing on zoning amendment regarding our disaster water supply project. So members of the public, any member of the public, will have an opportunity to speak during that public hearing, and we have a formal process to open and close and have a public hearing. The second public participation opportunity is there's a statutory requirement regarding presenting an annual report each year, and tonight we have the 2024 annual report, and under the community charter it's a requirement that we have a special public participation period for any members of the public who would like to speak to that particular item. So no one would be speaking after the presentation on the 9972 3rd Street. Anyone can speak during the public hearing. Anyone can speak during the special public participation just about the annual report. But of course, what we're going to start with next is our regular public participation period, when you can speak to any item on the agenda except the public hearing and the annual report. I hope that some find that a little helpful, and with that, I'll open public participation and invite anyone wishing to come forward to please provide your name, the municipality you reside in. Please come forward. There's just a little button at the bottom there to make the microphone live.
With the red?
You bet. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Doc Curry. I'm a longtime resident of the Saanich Peninsula. I come here tonight to ask Council and Mayor to intercede with their service provider, KMAC Services, the management company for the market. What do I mean when I say intercede? I mean to talk informally with them to seek a possible resolution. I hope that Council and Mayor had an opportunity to make it out to some of the events of the Seaside Music Festival this weekend. It was great. I would remind the Mayor and Council that some of the best acts of the music festival did not exist 8 months ago. It's just not in the nature of music. And those musicians that have existed as longtime bands, that's a particularity of them. It's not the norm. The policies that KMAC have adopted, specifically with respect to you must apply almost a year in advance to participate as a musician in the market, I believe to be unreasonable because it privileges a certain type of musician. Their policies make no distinction between musicians and breweries and taco trucks. It's all just vendors to them at present. So what I'm hoping is that Council, seeing and understanding the values of the Charter values of freedom of expression and the necessity to foster that, especially as Sydney is an artistic mecca, capital of the artistic community of the peninsula, I'm hoping that Sydney may, or the Council and Mayor may informally intervene with KMAC. That's what I'd like at this point. I brought tonight 2 Canadian-made pitch modulation devices. I'm very proud of them. I think that they're really cool. This is made by Fairfield Circuitry, which is an Ontario company. This is a Montreal Assembly count-to-5 pedal. They're amazing devices. They are the pinnacle of audio engineering in Canada at this point. And more than any musical capacity that I have, I'd really like to exhibit these devices and their capacities to my friends and neighbors in Sydney. And the policies of KMAC Services at present don't permit of that, because you need, in their terms, to have applied 8 months in advance. So it's my hope that Mayor and Council may see it in their wisdom to informally intercede in this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Curry, for coming forward this evening. We appreciate receiving your correspondence, and that staff have also responded to that as an operational matter. We won't be discussing it on this evening's agenda, but a council member, if they so wish, could bring a motion at a future meeting if that was desired. So thank you again for coming forward.
I did file a request for delegation. I don't feel as though that was seriously considered, and I think that its rejection was unfair.
Thank you again. Please come forward. Good evening, Mr. Podmore.
Kenny Podmore, 101-2354 Breathour Avenue, first Vice President of the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 37. You don't need my visa number as well, do you?
Shoes ice.
Mr. Mayor, members of council and members of staff, it's an honour to stand before you. I would just like, if I may, to touch on item 13C, our staff reports in respect of the installation of a veterans crosswalk. I came before Mayor and Council, I think it was February 24th, and I was well received, and we talked about locations, and I asked if a possible location could be in front of the town hall. But I did understand that there was things might be changing. Councillor Duncan came forward with an excellent site proposal by the Mary Winspear Centre. In the staff report tonight, we have two options. One is the junction of James White and 4th Street and the Mary Winspear. I would like Mayor and Council to know that option one, the junction of 4th and James White, is and would be the preferred location of the Legion. It just makes so sense for the location to be very close to the cenotaph. So I ask that Mayor and Council give that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. I'll call for a second time. Is anyone wishing to come forward during general public participation? And for a third and final time, anyone wishing to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the general public participation period and next go to the special public participation for the period for the 2024 annual report. Does anyone wish to come forward to speak to the annual report? Calling for a second time, anyone wishing to come forward? And for a third time, seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll close that special public participation. And we're next turning to public hearing. Public hearings are a statutory requirement under the Local Government Act for official community plan and some zoning amendment applications. They are an opportunity for any person who believes their interest is affected by the bylaw proposals to be heard. Council welcomes input from the public as it is an opportunity for the public to present all views. For speakers, please keep your remarks respectful at all times. No one will be or should feel discouraged, intimidated, or prevented from making their views heard. For those in the gallery, please refrain from applause or vocalizing during the entire public hearing. Council, during the public hearing, will listen to all speakers, have an open mind, and possibly ask questions of speakers for clarification. Council will not make its own views known, disclose its deliberations, or debate or challenge what is said. Once the public hearing is closed, Council must not receive any additional information other than to clarify with staff an issue raised during the public hearing. Council will deliberate and make its decision later in the evening under the bylaws section of the agenda, which this evening is item 5A. Written submissions have been circulated to Council, but they will not be read aloud. And I would now like to ask the corporate officer to please read the public hearing notice.
Thank you. The notice states that the Council of the Town of Sydney will hold a public hearing on Monday, June 23rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. to allow the public to make verbal or written representation to Council with respect to a proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 2275. The purpose of bylaw number 2293 is to allow shipping containers on lands designated as park by Sydney's official community plan at a maximum of 2 containers per property. This amendment is proposed in relation to the town's disaster water supply project. All persons who believe that their property is affected by the proposed amending bylaw will be afforded a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw at the public hearing. Written comments could be submitted until 4 p.m. on Monday, June 23rd, 2025 via email, mail, or Dropbox. Copies of the proposed bylaw and background documentation could be viewed at Sydney Town Hall from 8:30 a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday, excluding statutory holidays, or on the town's website. This notice was first advertised in the PNR on June 12th, 2025, and secondly on June 19th.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. I will now open the public hearing, and those wishing to speak, please come forward to the microphone and provide your name, the municipality you reside in, and indicate whether you're in favor or opposed to the bylaw changes. Calling for a second time, if anyone is wishing to come forward. And for a third and final time, is there anyone wishing to speak on the bylaw this evening? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and as indicated during my preamble, we will come back to that item a little further on the agenda. The next item before us this evening is under 4D, which is presentations. I indicated earlier we have a presentation by Eric Delorme and Dave Sargent from High Street Ventures, and they will be presenting on the tenant assistance for redevelopment at 9972 3rd Street. Gentlemen, I believe you're of the understanding that presenters have 10 minutes, and we would appreciate if you would consider taking questions from council after your presentation. For members of the public, after we have the presentation and council asks questions of the presenters, we will then turn to staff under the agenda item and ask for their introduction. Staff or council may then have questions of staff, and then council will have their discussion. So, gentlemen, please come forward.
Press the button. There we go. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name's Dave Sargent, representative from High Street. I do have a little presentation. How do I get that set up? We sent it in advance.
Okay, so I'll ask staff to assist.
They did send it. We didn't send it in to us.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was sent in. Okay, well, we're just going to go ahead without the slides, I guess.
Who did you send it to?
To admin and Cynthia.
Sandy, myself, admin. We didn't get anything today.
Yeah, we verified the other day, too.
I'll just check the admin box right now.
Okay.
Is it very large? Maybe it
Nope.
didn't come in?
Is that something would?
It wouldn't prevent us from having a conversation. So.
No, I appreciate that, but
Yeah.
would you be able to quickly send it at this time?
Yeah.
Yep.
We're certainly willing to give you a moment or two to do that.
Okay. We could probably get a flash drive or just email it in really quickly. Friday around 12:20.
Is your preference to send again, or do you have a flash drive?
I think Eric's working on it. Maybe we'll have a meeting on it, you can educate me on how. Do I use this clicker?
Oh, sure.
She wanted to.
It's
Yeah.
And then this is
Perfect.
left and right.
Forward, back, yeah.
Forward, back.
For those who may be watching online, we're just waiting another moment to have a presentation set up.
Let's see here. So you sent it to admin? Okay, I'm waiting for it right now.
This is to admin at sydney.ca?
As well as Sandy's email.
As well as mine?
I put both.
Because I don't have it on mine either.
We'll try again.
Check my email. John, I checked it.
Somebody waiting to be admitted in the online as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's our CA.
Ms. Nelson, do you think we might be a few more minutes? I could go to the bylaw item and come back to this.
Sure, I have not received the email in either inbox, and I'm looking at them right now, so.
Okay, I'll let staff work with High Street on that, and for those in attendance and those online, we're going to go to item 5A, which is bylaw number 2293. It's a zoning amendment to support the disaster water supply project by allowing shipping containers in parks. We have considered this at a previous meeting, and we had our public hearing this evening. For council's information, this is new information. We have not received the approval from the Ministry of Transportation as of this afternoon, so we can only provide or give third reading to this item, and it will come back to a future meeting for adoption. We anticipate that letter will be received prior to our council meeting in July. So I would look to a colleague to move the recommendation on third reading. Councillor Duck.
Yes, I'd like to move for third reading on zoning, bylaw number 2293, zoning amendment number 2.
Second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. I'm just going to continue here until I get a signal from staff. We're going to go to adoption of minutes. I'll seek a mover and seconder to approve the minutes from our regular council meeting of June 9th.
So moved.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We have next on, sorry, we're actually going to just wait for this presentation.
Hopefully there's nothing to scare. It's gonna be okay.
Maybe you're the Sydney delegation one, yeah.
Sign in or create account.
It's because it's on this device.
Create as a PDF.
I can't, I tried that, but it won't let me do anything through there.
You know what, I think I can speak to it.
We can download it as a PDF.
Yeah, I can speak to it, and I'll just use my hands a little bit more. We'll
Okay.
we'll fumble our way through it.
Okay,
Sometimes these things happen.
If you can just reintroduce yourself, and
Absolutely.
we'll start your 10 minutes from here, and if the slides become available, we'll give you the opportunity.
No, I appreciate that. My name's Dave Sargent, and I'm a representative for High Street, here to have a conversation with you tonight about our property on 3rd Street. It's kind of interesting being here. I've had the luxury of speaking with a few of you individually, but feel like I know everybody because I've been watching council hearings over the last little while. And tonight's interesting for us in preparing for this conversation because generally when we're in front of council, it's over a specific item in terms of a decision being made, a rezoning or an OCP amendment. But tonight is more just a bit of how we got to where we are with our current application. And then also briefly to talk about the tenant relocation assistance plan, the policy that Sydney has, and then to answer any questions that you may have about that. So to roll back the clock a few years, how we got here is we started looking at this property on 3rd Street in 2022. So some time ago, we've been working on this project for close to 3 years now. At that time, it was really just the due diligence period. So what I mean by that, it's kind of a fancy word of just saying, do we think that the product that we like to build would be acceptable to Sydney? And is there people within Sydney that would like to live in the homes that we built? After several months of going through that process, we felt like, for sure, Sydney's on board. The site makes sense, and we felt that we could introduce some new homes to Sydney that would be appreciated by the residents here. As we went through that process, I think it was October of 23, we closed on the property, and at that time let the residents know, there was 14 residents in the building, know that there was a new ownership. Shortly thereafter, we went through a process of hosting an information session for those tenants, providing compensation package programs and plans at that time, answering questions. And that is not a fun process to go through for anybody. We're fully aware of that, fully transparent of that. It's not fun to be notified that you're going to have to be moving in the future. But what we can do through that process is be transparent. We can be available for conversations, and we can go above and beyond what's required both from a provincial level as well as Sydney's policy level. So shortly after that period, Sydney was going through the Bill 44, massive rezoning and OCP amendments that were happening. Our site it started to get on our radar that it may be downzoned after the few years of work that we had already gone through. And that word in our industry is it's a very negative word because it has dramatic impacts potentially on a proposal. So when we heard that word, I don't know the correct adjective to use, but I can say that there was some 4-letter words that were thrown around in our office when we found out about that. It was very challenging after that much time and confidence that we had in the project that was being brought forward. And at the same time, I feel for staff because they were in the process of having to go through an OCP amendment and massive rezoning. And I really wanted to touch on a word, actually. Councillor O'Keefe, you mentioned it. I think it was in the June 2024 meeting, unintended consequences. So the unintended consequences that came from that decision for us in June of 2024 were initially, a bit of a crisis mode for us on that project in particular. But what could we do going forward? Initially, our hope was that a mistake had been made and that mistake would be reverted. We found out that it wasn't necessarily a mistake, but it was a decision by staff to try and open a discussion around rental tenure housing and whether we would move the project tenure from condo strata, which had always been planned for the previous 2 years, to a rental tenure. And it's a fairly blunt tool to downzone a site in order to have that conversation. And it was difficult to swallow if that was the intent of that conversation. After several more conversations with staff, however, we did realize that that was the intent. We amended our application. We went back to the drawing board. It took several months. That several months of time meant additional costs, not only from delays of the project, but also having to hire new consultants, having to go through additional processes of the rezoning, having to have additional consultations. And all of those costs, unfortunately, unintended consequences, they get passed on to the project, which eventually gets passed on to the tenants and or residents of that building. So when we think of that and we think of those unintended consequences and that June date and that decision that was made, one of the ones that we didn't really hone in on or think of about that time was in relation to the tenant assistance policy and how it applied to our particular project. Because prior to that June date, it actually didn't apply to our project at all for 2 reasons. One, we weren't building rental housing, and two, we weren't asking for a rezoning at all. So it was being used as a guideline that we followed. And I'm sorry I don't have our slide in front of us, but basically the compensation plans to date are just about 2.5 times what's required under the Sydney bylaw, and they're 10 times the provincial requirement. And something else to think about at that time, that June date when that decision was made, is that all but one tenant, so this is June of last year, all but one tenant had actually moved out of the building and or already entered agreement with High Street at that time. However, 9 months later, when we did put in our application in for development permit and rezoning, that called into question this policy. And I think it's caused confusion, again, the unintended consequence, confusion as to what a policy is. And a policy is not a law, it's not part of the RTA, it's not a bylaw, and it's not a statute. It's really just a guideline at this point, and it's a guideline that we took seriously and overextended on as well. The only item within that policy that we didn't follow or extend on is to offer the one remaining tenant permanent subsidized housing in the new building that we're looking to create that's now going to be rental tenure, and something that we're able to achieve through coming back, hopefully, rezoning the property back to its previous use and building 75 rental homes in Sydney. So tonight is really about a conversation around some of those impacts and unintended consequences. Happy to ask questions in and around tenant relocation policy, how tenants were treated, what the communication was with them. And then finally, hopefully, tonight we can leave and have some clarity on the demolition permit that we've applied for. Because we're under the understanding that we were waiting for this council hearing prior to a decision being made on the demolition permit that's been submitted. That's all I have to say. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll turn to my colleagues if there are questions of the presenter. Councillor Gurnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few and a couple of comments. First of all, thank you, Mr. Sargent, for your presentation. Unfortunately, the technology didn't want to.
I fumbled a bit without my prompts. So.
That's
If I can just interject for a moment, Councillor, I heard you say questions and comments.
you just want the questions.
This is a time for questions of the presenter. We will come to comments at a later time.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your colleagues for being here and your willingness to answer questions. So you spoke briefly to the tenants that's currently there, and in your submission you talk about the caretaker.
Correct.
So I'm just curious, as far as the compensation package for the caretaker, because it's not really, it's kind of briefly mentioned, but I'm just curious as to how, have they signed off on that? And
They have, yes.
okay. Yeah. My next question is, with regards to Appendix E, and I know that there was the longest tenured resident left in December of 2023, and they received the lowest payout. I was wondering, was there any consideration in the interest of fairness of reaching back, because you came up with your more beneficial plan later on, and they took far less than they would have got had they been granted the offer that came later. And was there any consideration given to reaching out to them to provide them with what other people in similar conditions got?
For that specific question, would it be okay if I asked my colleague Kyle to come
Sure.
up and
Yeah, no
answer?
worries.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi there. The particular tenant had given their notice prior to us having the meeting in March and had actually vacated the property on their own accord at that time.
Okay.
They reached back out to us and asked for what might be available because they heard about the packages being available. So we had asked what they were looking for, what would help them at that time, and that was the package that we were able to provide to them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Next question, with regards to, there's 13 apartments essentially and one house. So not clear to me from looking at Appendix E, but are there units that have 2 or more bedrooms?
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting a no and a yes.
All one bedroom? I thought there was a 2-bedroom in there.
So even the house was a 1-bedroom house?
The house was a 2-bedroom house.
Okay. So when I looked at the letter from March 21st in Appendix C, it indicated that there was an offer. It showed the different things from our policy, and it mentioned $500 for moving, but it doesn't mention the 750 for 2 or more bedrooms. Was that just an omission, or?
It may have just been an administrative error because they had already agreed to move out at that point, and we had an agreement in place that was above and beyond that, what was in the tenant assistance policy.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just curious, because as a person who's rented in the past and have children who've rented, in the ending of mutual agreement to end tenancy, was wondering about the non-disclosure agreement, because I've never had to deal with that, and my son hasn't. So is that something that's, I mean, I can't speak to whether that's regular process, or I was wondering what the rationale for that was.
I think as you're going through the process, we don't want, I mean, we ended up having everything be public, right? But we didn't want people feeling, depending on how long they stayed, what that extra month that was being offered was. We knew that we were going above and beyond the Sydney policy, but we didn't want it to be dependent on tenure. Oh, why did this person receive more versus that person? Just in that sense, in terms of equity between people. Yeah.
Okay, and also with regards to part 3 of our tenant assistance policy, and 3B specifically, and you did provide information on rental assistance programs, but I'm wondering why I could not find in the documents anywhere why information on alternative available rental units within Sydney or the Capital Region was provided to the tenants.
We have to lean on you again, Cal.
Yeah, I believe we reference kind of publicly available websites that list rentals available within the capital region, but it was really focused on, the large swath of rental housing in all of kind of the area here.
One last question for now, if I may. And you mentioned in 3A about the comparable unit for a tenant, and you said it wasn't offered. Given that there's only one tenant, I'm just wondering why in a building of 75, why you wouldn't be able to have 74 as market rent and offer the tenant a comparable unit?
Well, there's a couple reasons for that, and I think the best reason that we can explain for people is that I don't think it's equitable for the other 74 future tenants to have to subsidize someone in perpetuity. We don't know how long that resident will be there. I think there are programs for subsidized housing. We're not a subsidized housing provider. We do provide market affordable rental housing, but we're not providing subsidized housing. And I do not believe that it is equitable that 74 new residents have to subsidize another resident simply because they had lived in the building there prior.
Okay, that's all for me for now. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor. Turn to Councillor O'Keefe next.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. In the initial information that went out to those tenants, was there information about what the rules were under the Residential Tenancy Act in terms of what the Act required of you as the developer in terms of notice and those sorts of things?
Sorry, I'm leaning on Kyle a lot here. He's
It was discussed at the in-person meeting that we had in March of 2024, that it would be the 4 months notice and 1 month's compensation that's required under the Tenancy Act once the demolition permit's issued.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, all right. And did you keep any kind of documentation in terms of, like, once somebody came to an agreement with you to sign a waiver or something to say this is what's agreed upon, and did you track that sort of information?
Sorry, before the question is answered, I'd like to appreciate the intent of that question.
Okay, so I guess I'm sort of more leaping ahead to, in terms of the policy and providing sort of a summary of what happened with each tenant. And one of the difficulties I've had with some of the information is that there's information from the developer, but I don't see anything from the tenants themselves. So that's why I'm asking if that kind of information would have been available.
Yes, we do have signed agreements with all of the tenants that chose to move out with the compensation packages.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll next turn to Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you. So your project has been really kind of the first of its kind for you. I believe you've been mostly greenfield development up to this point. Have you ever done a demolition before, a redevelopment?
Me personally, yes. High Street has been around for 20 years, and they've worked a lot on the island and have built 5,100 homes now in different areas. The majority of those are greenfields. There is experience with our colleagues with infill. I've worked personally on many infill sites, but at High Street, the majority of the sites are greenfield sites, yes.
Okay, so if you've done infill, and I'm just going to say, so the reason I'm asking you whether you have experience with doing infill with where there's existing tenants is just as you mentioned, the field has been changing, right, with our OCP, but also in terms of the province and the guidelines they've been giving through the Residential Tenancy Act updates, and in terms of municipalities coming up with new kind of tenant assistance policies and things like that. And as a small municipality, we're obviously having to follow behind them, but usually some years behind as we watch what they do.
Sure.
Because we don't have the staff. And so what I'm asking is, some of the larger municipalities, one of the things that we're seeing in their policies is that the work that is being done between the developer and, the negotiations between the developer and the people who are in the property is being facilitated through their tenant assistance manager. So somebody who works there who presumably has perhaps the dedicated job of managing the tenant relations. Do you have somebody like that on staff? Is this a new thing for you?
Kyle. We have Kyle.
You have Kyle.
We have, so we manage our own communities as well. So Kyle is part of the communities team. So we do work with tenants daily. So there's multiple team members that are focused on this. Not necessarily on the relocation portion, but people are moving in and out of our buildings on not a daily basis, but certainly a weekly basis. So there is constant communication with multiple levels of staff at our office. Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Is there kind of like an industry best practices guideline? From the government perspective, we always kind of, when we start looking into it, we're looking at what the province puts out that tells municipalities to do. Is there guidance from your industry that tells you how you're supposed to deal with the tenants, that in future iterations, when we start putting these things together to make sure that everybody actually feels like they're being dealt with and that council is not ending up in a mediator role?
Yes.
Is there industry best practices, something that we can refer to or that your tenants can refer to kind of say, this is how it's supposed to be done?
I think the best thing to look to is the RTA. I think a lot of the confusion that is happening is each municipality is creating its own rules. So when we look to the province to create rules, and then each municipality creates its own set of rules, and then it's different down the street than it is in Sydney versus in Victoria versus in Esquimalt versus in Saanich, and everyone is looking for what the actual rules and guidelines are. Unfortunately, we don't have necessarily an industry standard other than the provincial guidelines, and then each municipality can choose to change those, and whether that's through a policy or whether that's now through a bylaw. I believe that's up to staff, and it's also up to council to choose if they want to go away from the provincial requirements. In terms of best practices and how we manage and deal with people in these situations, I think the best thing that we can do is have respect for people. And we have to understand that this is difficult and that there's pressures on people for this. And at the same time, we are trying to deliver new housing to Sydney. So it's a challenging place for staff to be. It's a challenging place for you to sit as councillors. It's a challenging place for tenants when they're asked to relocate. But we have provided above and beyond, if we looked at Sydney as a standard, for the remaining tenant, there is an offer that's 4 times as much as what's required under the Sydney bylaw or policy, because it's not a bylaw, sorry, at this time. So the best thing that we can do, I think, is be open, communicative, and be reasonable. But sometimes it can still be challenging when you try and be reasonable, and that's when we would look to the RTA. We would look to we would look to the municipality to issue the demolition permit so that we can provide proper notice through the RTA for 4 months and still provide the compensation that we've offered.
Okay, thanks. So my second question then is regarding the rentals that you've moved on from condos and now said you could, in one of your letters here, have market rentals
Correct.
that met step code, and of
4
course-
or above, yes.
4 and above, yeah.
Yes.
Which is obviously very attractive for a municipality. I think you are one of the larger buildings and with 75 units that would be doing market rental, and we ask every large development that goes in. We had Beacon West was able to do, I believe it was 20% below rental or below market for 20 years. And whether you have looked at some percentage of that could be set aside as below market.
I think we would have had an opportunity to have that discussion had we looked at that from the start of the project. High Street's actually fairly agnostic as to whether they build strata rental or strata and or rental. In this specific case, when we looked at this particular property, the cost of the property, the market, it was something that we definitely were moving forward with on a strata property. We didn't think we could make rental work. We're salvaging it at this point to try and make it work based on the unfortunate situation that we've gone through in terms of the zoning entitlements being removed from us. But we're trying to do the best that we can and provide Sydney with the housing that they've asked for. But to then stipulate on top of that additional requirements for affordable housing, I don't think it would happen. It's very challenging to make it happen as is. I think the only way you could see something like that happen would be incentives. And unfortunately, we're going the opposite way. We've been disincentivized, and there's additional fees that have been added on top of us just to get our zoning back. So we have to pay additional community amenity charges just to get the zoning back that we had before, on top of 1+ year delay. So then to also ask for affordable housing on top of that or below market housing, I think you would just stall out the project.
Okay, it's worth asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And final question, trees? You didn't mention them in your presentation, but
Councillor Duncan, I'm going to interject.
Yeah.
We're speaking to the tenant assistance
Oh, just
policy
to the
this
tenant
evening. We
assistance
can come
policy.
back to that when the applicant is coming forward with their development application.
sure, thanks, sorry.
No.
You said community amenity funds and I was gonna go there.
Yeah, happy to talk about trees if it's an opportunity tonight. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions from council, I want to thank the presenters this evening
Thank you.
for both your presentation and taking our questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to close off the presentation at this point, and I'm now going to turn to staff under the agenda item 13A, which we moved up to this point. To please introduce the item, I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the staff report on the agenda addresses the application of the town's tenant assistance policy to 9972 3rd Street. The policy was adopted by council in 2019 and is intended to assist tenants who may be facing displacement due to redevelopment of a purpose-built rental building. The policy is intended to set Sydney's expectations regarding tenant assistance and is intended to go above and beyond the provisions of the Residential Tenancy Act. However, because the policy is only a policy, it cannot be enforced like a bylaw, but must be considered indirectly by council. And as stated in the policy, this happens as part of a rezoning application with a redevelopment. For the same reason, the policy provides general guidance for how tenant assistance should be approached, but the town does not have the legislative or legal ability to directly require compliance. 9972 3rd Street is a recently consolidated, originally 7-parcel property that contains an 8-unit and a 12-unit walk-up rental buildings dating back to 1969, one small single-family home, and a parking structure facing 4th Street. In 2019, council considered an application for a 4-story 31-unit residential development that was approved. However, the DP for that, the development permit for that has expired. At that time, the site was zoned RM7, which is Sydney's four-story apartment or townhouse zoning, allowing for either condo or rental development. And last year in 2024, it was rezoned to RM6R, which is a dedicated rental tenure zoning that allows for up to 3 stories of either townhouse or apartment dwellings. At the time when it was rezoned last year, the property owner had already purchased the property, and the purchase price was reflective, in staff's opinion, of a market condo purchase. In March 2025, the town received a redevelopment application that included a rezoning, a development permit, and development variance permit applications. And as part of this application, the property owner provided information on compliance with the town's tenant assistance policy, which is included as Appendix B to the report. Following the receipt of the redevelopment application, several weeks later, the property owner also applied for a demolition permit, and it's that application that's prompted this report to council. So this report summarizes compliance with the tenant assistance policy in the report. And in staff's opinion and in summary, I won't go through every piece, but the property owner's actions do exceed the tenant assistance policy requirements in some areas, and in other areas they don't address it at all. However, on the whole, in staff's opinion, substantial action vis-a-vis the policy has been taken. Staff note again that the policy does not require approval by staff or council. It only requires submission of a report on tenants' assistance actions taken by the property owner. However, council may wish to consider these actions when making a decision on the rezoning application related to the redevelopment. The town can also not withhold a demolition permit based on compliance or lack of compliance with the report, or with the policy, sorry. So prior to the demolition permits issuance that's been applied for, staff wish to bring this information to council for consideration and possible feedback to the property owner. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. So I'll turn to councillors. I'll begin with Councillor Rintoul, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And just for clarity, Mr. Newcomb, I think on that, through the mayor to you, that last point, this is presented to council for information, so this is an update, but I've heard from the developer this evening that they're looking for clarity on the demolition permit, perhaps as an outcome of this conversation. I don't think you're getting that this evening. You know, this isn't presented in that manner. It's an information update. I wonder if this has created expectation, the fact that this is being discussed on the part of the tenant as well, the remaining tenant, and I don't know that there's any scenario this evening that's going to be discussed, because this is matters for information as well. So for clarity's sake, it's staff's intent to ensure that council is aware of what's happened to date. You're saying council has no role or no mechanism to enforce the tenant assistance policy. So what's our, if we all manage to speak to the report and the matter at hand, what's staff looking for an outcome, or is it simply to provide us with an update on this matter?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So council has not yet seen the redevelopment application for this property, obviously. So there's no information available from that perspective. However, council's free to express their opinions on where they think the property owner has landed vis-a-vis aspects of the policy. And I think this is an opportunity, and likely the only opportunity for council to express those opinions for the property owner's benefit prior to the rezoning application coming forward.
Sure. So if I'm being asked for my comments, I would say that given the number of tenants that were successfully addressed, and whether or not they have ongoing concerns, we don't know. You've got one tenant remaining, and I think it's unfortunate that the developer's been unable to resolve this to the mutual satisfaction of both parties. Again, we seem somewhat impotent with respect to having anything done with regards to the tap. So I'm not sure what we're doing here, other than trying to be well-informed in terms of how this works, and unfortunately is not working to the satisfaction of one of your tenants. So I would encourage you, from my perspective, to get that resolved and move forward with your project, because we haven't seen, as was noted, anything with respect to authorizations for the project itself. And I think you'll get clarity through staff in the normal process on the demolition permit. That's not a matter that comes before council. So somewhat unfortunate that we're all in this position, and I feel for both the tenant and frankly for, you know, the developer, and hope that you redouble your efforts expeditiously to try and come to a mutual favorable conclusion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. Per Councillor Rentoule's comments, I believe part of the problem that they're having is that this staff, they were waiting for what this staff report would clarify, which is that we lack enforcement and jurisdiction. And so, you know, holding out for council directive on how the TAP be applied before the permits go through is not actually something that can be waited for. It's not something council can give at this time, and I think that was perhaps part of the information necessary for further negotiations. I believe what the developer has said regarding their rationale regarding equity and how they've applied the TAP, that when they first approached all the tenants, it was with a payout, and the other tenants were never approached with the option to be given first right of refusal. And that, looking at this from council and hearing from the staff report, you know, we're not actually given a criteria of where we would decide whether enough was applied. We are kind of given such that our decision would look arbitrary as well, and that staff's decision in the application ends up looking arbitrary. And I don't actually like how that lands on staff, and how and so for my purposes, I guess my question, just knowing what the tenants have been in communication about, and that eye towards equity going forward with tenants, we've been asked about a building maintenance bylaw by the tenants. That this report notes that 2024 was when we were empowered to have a tenant protection bylaw, which is obviously very recent. However, Victoria had a building maintenance bylaw in 2021. We have never given staff direction on a building maintenance bylaw, of course. And so I guess my question would be, would that be something that would naturally follow from a tenant protection bylaw when you would look at that? Because that's currently in our strategic plan. Or will that be something that, if council wishes to direct staff on that at a future date, we should bring forward to the strategic plan separately?
So Victoria does have a building maintenance bylaw. The reason Victoria has a building maintenance bylaw is because they've had a problem with building maintenance in the past, where for whatever reason, buildings have been allowed to fall into disrepair, maybe as part of a, lead up towards redevelopment, or for other reasons. Can't speculate, but the reason Sydney does not have a building maintenance bylaw is because, frankly, we've never had a problem with building maintenance. There have been instances where property owners have stopped maintaining their buildings. Generally, there's a very good reason for that, which is if you're going to redevelop it, there's no point in spending money on it. I would say, in my experience in Sydney, there hasn't been a situation where I think tenants have remained in a building this long, and so the perception of the building not being maintained is, very closely experienced, perhaps. But generally speaking, Sydney has not had any issue with building maintenance, nor have we had a need to sort of force the issue. The town does have an unsightly premise bylaw that also applies to buildings. And so we can approach property owners with concerns regarding the appearance of a building. But yeah, there's been no need for a building maintenance bylaw.
Thank you. And I guess just to follow up on that, it seems that the BC Building Code and our bylaw inspectors, that most of the things that I would have expected would fall under there would fall under that if there were serious, problems that were that were, you know, that it was actually a health and safety issue, that our bylaw would probably catch that. I guess there'd be things like mold that they wouldn't necessarily, but what above and beyond kind of BC building code and, you know, like the fire inspection that would already be done in a multi-unit residential would even be under such a thing?
Councillor Duncan, I'm going to interject for a moment. I gave some latitude in terms of asking the question about a building maintenance bylaw. We are considering the tenant assistance policy. It was an item of correspondence. As you indicated, it was within an item of correspondence with regards to a building bylaw. And we're now having some back and forth on that. Again, this correspondence has been copied to correspondence for information, and the same correspondence that we've received, all of the correspondence received tonight making reference to the development, will come forward again when the application comes forward, and we could raise it for consideration at that time.
Okay. So my purpose merely for raising it now was, again, simply because of what Councillor Rintoul had previously noted, which is that they're waiting for a resolution for this, and that both the developer and I believe the tenants had this particular meeting as somewhat of a date in their mind, that they would be getting some sort of resolution from staff or council in an informal way that would allow them to move forward with that. And so I was merely asking questions to try and address those things in a public forum in the interest of moving that forward. But if that cannot be answered quickly, then I will desist.
I'm happy to turn to staff.
Thank you. Just wanted to comment on a previous comment that Councillor Duncan made regarding the application of the tenant assistance policy. I just wanted to highlight that when the town developed this policy in 2019 and up until last year, there was no legislative basis for a policy of this type at all. There is no force of law that would allow the town to apply this policy in the way that, you know, a bylaw can be enforced, or a piece of legislation can be enforced. Unlike an official community plan or a zoning bylaw, that's specifically the authorities for that are laid out in the Local Government Act. Up until last year, when the province brought in the idea of a tenant protection bylaw, these policies in any municipality really had no direct enforceability, just for information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and as the staff report indicates, I will provide some feedback directly to the proponents. And I think I noted when you're speaking to us about the being respectful part, and I think for the most part you probably have. There are a couple of instances in here where words matter, and I was reading the letter from their CEO, I believe it's Mr. Butler, and just some of the way it's worded, existing tenants at the rundown old buildings. And I couldn't help but think to myself, these are people's homes, and it denigrates their home, and indirectly I perceive it to denigrate the people that live in it for choosing to live in it. So I just, you know, I'm careful in the way things are worded and how people can take that. I think that's important. And you mentioned earlier that it, you know, I know you probably didn't mean it to come this way, but when you say, and the tenants are in the room, when you say it's not fun to go through this process, I think that kind of belittles what they really go through. I think we're lost in the whole housing crisis situation. We've lost sight of the fact that these are people's homes, and that's their attachment to the community. And we have low vacancy rates in Sydney and throughout the CRD. And in this particular case, their ability to pay is going to even lower that. And they may have to leave the community. And when you have connections in the community and there's all kinds of things that may work here, I don't know their individual stories, it goes beyond not fun. It tears their life apart. It puts everything in a whole new view and a whole new way of looking at life. And it's incredibly sad. And I would just say to you, if as you're going through this process, just to be mindful of words and what you say and how it will impact people who are going through something which really is traumatic for them. And also with regards to the 3A part of the TAP, and I understand your rationale for subsidizing, but as a person who's rented before, I didn't know what anybody else paid for rent in my building. And so I think there is a path to have a comparable unit. I don't see it as a financial burden to the overall project for one unit. And I think it would go a long way to probably relieving what you're going through. I think I understand that as people who live in the community and have for quite some time, they probably want to stay here. And I think when we start talking about just the financial aspect of something and how much compensation is required and how much is given, it becomes more transactional and we lose the humanity of the process. And those would be my comments to you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gurnett. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. And I'll preface my comments by, I know that a lot of this is sort of water under the bridge, but maybe things to keep in mind in the future. I recognize in terms of communication, so I recognize when you bought first got the property, the tap didn't apply and you weren't aware of it, obviously. And so the communications were focused on enticing the tenants to move voluntarily, and I understand the rationale for that. In those communications, though, I didn't see mention of what the tenants' rights were under the RTA, which I think is important to include. And I know you mentioned that those things were mentioned verbally, but I think it's important to educate people on those things. And while I know it's, one could make the case that, well, it's up to people to educate themselves on these things. But I know from the people living in that building, there's seniors, there's immigrants, people whose English was a second language. So it was a really difficult time for them in terms of wondering, understanding what was going on and what their rights were. So I think it's important to be able to highlight those things for people. I think many of them just anecdotally, excuse me, felt under extreme pressure to move, perhaps not realizing how much time they might have. Now, so I understand that there was communications that took place before the tap, and I guess what I would expect, and I'm not sure if this has happened or not, that there would be new communications going out to whatever the remaining tenant, I think there's just one left, in terms of what their rights are and what's available to them. And my question before about whether you kept track of things is, maybe some of those things have taken place, but it's hard for me to know for sure just based on getting the information from you. So all we get is, maybe emails from tenants about things, how things haven't gone so well. So it's tough being in this position of being mediator, trying to determine what actually happened or took place. So that's why my previous question about, did you have waivers or did people sign off on these things? Yeah, so I guess in the future, some sort of checklist or something that we would be able to easily see that these things had taken place. And I think, and I guess I would just echo my colleague's comments about, doing something to resolve things with the last tenant or tenants that are there in a expeditious manner and in a way that they feel that their concerns have been heard and met. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Seeing no other first-time speakers, I'll turn to Councillor Duncan for a second time.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor O'Keefe's question, I guess, or comment, I guess, has spurred another question for me. And I asked earlier too about standards in the industry regarding how tenants are dealt with, and obviously we've seen the correspondence. Our tenants were not pleased, and Councillor Garnett, commented on that as well, and so obviously this is a matter of without clear guidance. Developers are also left to do it on their own, and I don't know. There's probably people who can train them, and that they could consult with as well. But then that's up to them. And as a municipality, we can't require that. And so I guess my question is more for staff about how do we learn from this experience? Because our staff are, you know, like 1/100th of what, say, a municipality like Burnaby has on a file for affordable housing. They probably have 100 staff. We have just for housing, and we have 95 in total. And so our staff are left having to answer questions that are not only not their job description, but are outside their legal jurisdiction to do. We as council have used the word mediator a number of times, which again is both not our job and not something we're legally capable of doing. This would be something that the developers and the tenants, as per our TAP, are supposed to work out on their own, but if they are not, they must turn to the residential tenancy branch and seek, you know, usually legal counsel there, mediators between landlords and tenants. What kind of guidance could we, as a municipality, provide to make sure that all tenants are getting this information without having to rely on people kind of having to superhero it the way these remaining tenants have in doing all their own research and then disseminating it to other tenants?
I think there will be plenty of time for discussion on lessons learned when staff report back regarding the tenant protection bylaw. There's a lot there, and then probably is not the ideal time to delve into that stuff. I would also like to raise the point that I think the tenant assistance policy that the town currently has in terms of its contents reflect industry best practices. In terms of the compensation levels stated in the policy, I think that's pretty typical across most municipalities that have a similar policy, with some variations. Having been involved in its development, I think it's reflective of most policies that are out there. The challenge is that municipalities, when they develop these policies, tried to attack a very difficult problem with essentially no tools, no real tools. The provincial government at that time hadn't provided those things, and so I think the outcome of that is generally that this is not a black and white issue, and staff's attempt to apply this policy is maybe not as clear cut as it should be, but I think we've tried our best here. Thank you.
No, thank you. Just so that the public understands, the staff is taking learnings from this. We have a lot, and it will be coming forward. We will always do better next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Seeing no further speakers, as we were made aware through the introduction, we're receiving this information this evening. We're receiving this report for information. There's no recommendation, and so we will move to the next item. We're now coming back to the order of the regular agenda. We had done the minutes, approved the minutes. The next item to be considered is council reports, and under 11A, we have Councillor Duck has a motion to move. There is an item in the agenda with regarding the 2025 UBCM conference. And Councillor Duck, I would ask that you move your recommendation. I will look for a seconder, and then allow the mover and seconder to motivate. Anyone with questions could ask questions once the motion's on the floor. Councillor Duck.
Agreed. I will move the recommendation that funding for lodging expenses to councillors attending the 2025 UBCM conference in Victoria be approved.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As outlined in the proposal, the recommendations, I just think there's no guidance within the current expense policy to cover travel inside a region. So, for example, if we go to a conference in Souk or Victoria in this case, there's no guidance from the expense reimbursement policy as to what we can get covered there. The challenge with UBCM is it's not just a regular conference from 9 to 5. It runs with early morning meetings to late night meetings, whether that's social or informational. And my challenge in attending past conferences was that even staying in the hotel, you were pressed for time. because there's a lot going on and a lot you're attending. And I think to make the best value of our attendance is to have us there as attendees, not just as visitors. Right? They're coming in each day to try and cover it. The other part I'm concerned about is just relatively the safety and security of counselors attending. I myself will be traveling by bus and back by bus, and just to accommodate schedules. I don't know how long that will take and whether there'll be transportation early enough in the morning or late enough at night to attend these. So it's just a consideration. I don't think it's something, I'm not proposing that it cover the entire accommodation for the entire conference, but that there's some latitude for counselors to look at what they want to attend and be able to consider staying there a night or two, depending on what was late at night or early in the morning, and not about staying there from Sunday night to Friday night or something like that. And I think there's some opportunity to do this within the current budget and not putting pressure on our expenses in that area. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll turn to Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel much the same way as my colleague. Relatively few members of council do go to these conferences, conventions. I find them quite useful. They're helpful in terms of connecting with colleagues from other municipalities. They're useful in staying abreast of issues that affect us in a more regional way. I find that some of the information sessions, and I think a colleague, Councillor O'Keefe, will agree that at UBCM in past years we've attended conferences that have led to very substantial, I don't want to call it legislation, but have certainly led to valuable input for this council when it came to construction and development, et cetera, et cetera. I, for one, if I do attend a conference like this, I want to be engaged. If I'm going there and I'm going to use council's money for this, I'm going to put as much energy and effort into attending as many of the sessions as I can within reason. And if I have to focus on driving, or as my colleague has suggested, using public transit at the beginning and the end of a day, for one thing, it adds to fatigue. It takes away from the ability to focus and concentrate on the information at hand. And I think that's why, for the most part, 99, if not all, 100% of conference attendees do stay in the hotel so that they're proximal to the events, to the committee meetings, et cetera, et cetera. I think you may have noticed that I had asked our CFO to provide us some financial data on how our budgets have been used in past years. Council expense budgets have typically been underutilized, and I think for this year as well, we are tracking to be underutilized at the same time. And so I don't think, I think that Mr. Hissick stated that there's $10,000 that's been allocated to UBCM. I don't know how many of the councillors are intending to go to UBCM, but typically there's 3, maybe 4 of us that do go, and within that $10,000 budget, I believe that there is sufficient latitude for a few nights of hotel for those councillors that wish it. So I'm happy to support this. I don't think it places an unreasonable burden on council or on taxpayers. If councillors are going to be attending these conferences, they should be able to do so with their full attention and not have to worry about a lengthy commute. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And if I may, before I speak, I'd like to ask a question if I could, to Councillor Duck.
Please.
In your motion, speaking to late evening, what is a typical activity that takes place in late evening?
There are educational sessions and interactions with other council members that go into hosted events that are put on in the evenings, typically starting at 5 or 7 and go till 9 or 10.
Okay, thank you. I guess my starting point is, from my, just all my perspective, of course, attending conferences is not mandatory, it's optional. So it's a choice we make. And I think Victoria is less than 27 kilometers away. I think we seem to be starting from the premise that we have I believe it's a $24,000 budget per year for council, for conferences and the like. And we don't have to spend it. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to spend it. And it is taxpayer money, even if it is budgeted for. So any money that's not spent is still taxpayer money going back into our coffers. I understand some of the rationale that council members have brought forward, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that, having spoken with the Director of Finance earlier, that since 2006 at least, this year we approved the largest tax increase. I don't know, before 2006. So if we're expecting our residents, and I think the rationale was justified for the increase, but I think if we're going to say to our taxpayers, we need to increase your taxes this much, I think we also have to be cognizant of how we're spending their money, and in what context. In this particular year, I think it sets a poor precedent, sets a poor example. When people have to find ways to pay their property taxes, and maybe it's a struggle for them. When we live this close to Victoria, I don't see the rationale for it at all in the end of the day, so I won't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Question through you to staff in terms of the motion as it's worded. Do staff envision this as being a catalyst to change the policy, or is this viewed as sort of a one-off request with respect to UBCM and Victoria?
I would, sorry about that. I would view this as immediately as a one-off request, but then to be looking at the council expense policy more broadly, which I know there's other elements of the policy that we're considering as well, and bringing it back at a future date for consideration.
Thank you. Yeah, because I would suggest that probably the more holistic manner in which to address this is through policy. This isn't a reoccurring theme and discussion. I appreciate Councillor Garnett's comments. I guess I'll preface my comments by saying that I do not attend UBCM or AVICC, and that's just simply because, like some of my colleagues, I've got a day job, and I'm not available during the week to attend a conference for 2 or 3 days. And I'm sure, like Councillor Garnett, I appreciate the fact that members of council who have latitude in their schedules to be able to do that are representing Sydney in these forums. And I recognize when I attend through work conferences, be in Victoria and elsewhere, I typically would look to find one night where I'm able to be there for the reasons Councillor Duck has acknowledged. That quite often opportunities to engage with government speakers at events may well be in the evening at a dinner, and or related industry, where there's opportunities to engage with industry, be it informally or formally, in the evening. So I do appreciate those councillors that are able to take their personal time to the benefit of the town to attend these functions, and I feel that it's reasonable, although perhaps should be identified in policy what the parameters would be for a stay. But at this point, I'm inclined to support the motion for those reasons. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm inclined to support the motion for a few reasons. I think it's important to highlight that this is, although it is a choice and we don't have to go, but all of the UBCMs that I've been to couple AVICCs I've just found extremely valuable in terms of, I think I come away from those things more educated, having a more well-rounded understanding of things like accessibility, housing, emergency planning, finding out what other municipalities are doing, hearing directly from the provincial ministers on things that are happening, being able to ask them directly questions, also the resolutions that come forward, and being able to give Sydney's perspective and point of view on those things. So this isn't like sort of a vacation trip for people. This is, I think, a significant investment in our personal time, a full week that we devote. We don't get paid any extra to do it. It's just part of our regular salary to invest a full week, sometimes, of our personal time away from families to help us represent and make better decisions. So I think those are the sort of things that are in my mind. In regards to the cost, I don't see us increasing the budget. What I would hope is that we maintain the budget that's there already, and perhaps we do an annual poll to if we're going to develop policy in the future, to find out how many people are interested in going to this or that, and then if there's flexibility in the budget to allow accommodation, say if the conference is again in Victoria, that we can do that. So for this year, as a one-off, I'm happy to support it, as long as we're not increasing the budget in order to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Not seeing other speakers, seeing any other first-time speakers yet. I'll speak to this. I appreciate the item being raised and the rationale provided by the movers and those in support. I have some concerns, and part of my concerns are that the conference has been described, and the benefit to councillors in terms of the responsibilities that we have at this council table and other committees and commissions that we serve on. The main business of the conference generally starts at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning and goes to 5 o'clock or 5:30. There are breakfasts in the morning, and sometimes there are guest speakers, and in the evening there are receptions and a banquet. I've attended the conferences for the 3 years while I served on council from 2008 to 2011, and this will be the sixth or seventh time attending while serving last term and this term in this role. There are ample opportunities, the way the conference is scheduled, to meet with ministers. There's actually a process for requesting meetings with ministers and for meeting with others. The breaks and the lunches provided at the conference are both social and working opportunities for the delegates attending. And there are receptions in the evening. There is nothing on the Monday evening. On the Tuesday evening, there are 2 receptions from 5:30. On Wednesday evening, there is after 5 o'clock, there is a reception, a QP reception. On Thursday evening, there is the banquet. On Friday, business concludes at 12 noon. So I think there's ample opportunity to do the networking that has been described by colleagues with other elected colleagues, with ministry officials or other elected representatives. They have a great trade show at each of these, and there's lots of opportunity to meet representatives from different organizations during the regular business time. Comment has been made with regards to the travel time. Councillor Garnett, I think, made reference to it's 27 kilometers from the town hall to the Victoria Conference Centre. Traveling earlier in the morning or traveling at this time in the evening doesn't take that long. By public transit it may, but as council is aware, in the current expense policy provided Councillors it is reasonable to take a cab or an Uber if the transit is not as frequent or reliable in the morning, at the beginning of the morning, or in the evening. And I think that is a more practical alternative to take. A taxi or an Uber at those times of day is only going to take a half hour between the conference center and here in Sydney. I have to travel it to CRD a number of times a week, and I know other colleagues have for other business. And I guess my last concern is we know that the hotels that are either arranged through UBCM, or if the bookings are full that are arranged by our town staff, range $300 to $400 to above $400 per night. And I want to come back to the taxpayer. We approved a 10.5% tax increase this year, and I think while it may be in a particular budget, we know that all of the staff, because the staff have told us during budget presentations every year, that they are making their best efforts within the budgets that they have to spend less than the budgets, to find ways to do things more efficiently or more effectively. And each year we do have a surplus. Now, legally, we're not allowed to run a deficit, so there is usually some room, if you will, within budgets. But we know staff are acting on that, and I think it's incumbent upon us as members of council to exercise prudence as well. And I think there are reasonable alternatives concerning the travel time and the business versus the more social time that occurs in the evening at this conference. So I respectfully won't be supporting the motion. I'll turn if there are any other speakers. I'm not seeing any. Councillor Garnett, sorry for a second.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, I understand that my fellow councillors, when they attend, do see value, and there's been many things listed as to what advantageous things come out of these conferences. But specifically to this particular item, I think those things can still be accomplished without staying the night when it's such a close proximity to where we live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question. Those in favour? Those opposed? Councillor Duncan, Councillor Garnett, myself are opposed. That motion carries. Thank you. We're next turning to another council report. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, who is our representative to the liaison to the Memorial Park Society, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to go quickly, but they were very, very busy. That was a lot of stuff that came out of this meeting, all good things. So I'll go in ascending order of how it affects council business. But in terms of, they have a new website and ticketing software up, so members of the public who are looking at that, you'll be able to see that hopefully this summer, getting up to date. The roof is going to be patched hopefully this year. It was supposed to be last year, but the contractor did a no-show. So this year they're coming back. They've replaced the HVAC control on the roof, and because they're able to do roof stuff and that at the same time, they're going to kind of look at making sure that as things get replaced, they'll be compatible with any future electronics that might be needed up there for the leaderboard, and keeping a mind in that. So hopefully planning all of this and having it happen at the same time will save some money later. Collective bargaining for the union employees that are there will happen this year. And the Merry Winspear is booked up for shows for every Friday and Saturday until June 2026. Yeah, so they're hopping. And one thing I learned also at the last meeting is that they're the only venue left outside of UVic that also promotes their own shows rather than simply being a venue that rents out, that they actually feature their own shows. So they're an incredible facility, and they're obviously highly in demand. And they've been changing the way they accept money and do contracts to streamline that as well. So that's probably only going to increase in the future. So they're planning for 2026, and they'd had to book this far in advance because they were so booked up, is their 25th anniversary gala for the Merry Winspear Center. Make sure I don't miss anything here. A report, this is from North Saanich that got brought forward, but it I guess may affect conferences in town, is that the Epicure facility is going to be used as a soundstage for the film industry for a 6-month temporary use permit, because it's very high and they can use that. And so we might be starting to attract some of that South Island film industry business in here using that. They've established a new Blue Heron Park Committee, so that all of the business about Blue Heron Park will not be run directly through the board's time anymore, and hopefully can be kind of used there, and they'll have more, hopefully, stakeholders involved. There's kind of a draft terms of reference, so we'll see who gets added to that. As they've been, you know, there's a lot going on there as well. North Saanich proposed pickleball courts potentially for that location. There's new residents nearby. The Soccer Association built new fields. And there's a lot of players. The RCMP have now started moving people who've been camping long-term in the Blue Heron Park. If you've gone through here, you've probably noticed a lot, but it just turned out this was a jurisdiction thing, and North Saanich needed to ask them to come in. And now that they have permission, that's going to be happening, and so they realized they needed really more of a parks master plan, and that will be something that Blue Heron Park Committee starts looking at. Also things like the poison hemlock control, if you've got people using that park. There's poison hemlock near the Moti area, and so some of it's being controlled by North Saanich, some gets controlled by the Soccer Association, and we're waiting for Moti to do the rest. It's a multi-jurisdictional issue. Second to last thing we're on here, there's a governance committee, and they're looking at a donation and gift policy. So hopefully there will be something that will eventually be a bit of a summary front-facing on the website there, so that people will understand how, if they're making donations to the foundation or the society, how that will be used. And the last thing, which we have discussed at council before, of course, is for the new bus loop that's adjacent. And so BC Transit did go to the Mary Winspear board and have it, or I get at least a Denny, and have a discussion. And they requested so that the BC Transit would really understand what they meant by when they have a large event, what the traffic is like, that they will be on site for a couple of the large events that will actually be going on, so that BC Transit will actually observe the traffic flow, where people park, and how people drive. So that should hopefully help them design, and I was really impressed that Ms. Warner asked them to do that. And if anybody has any questions, I think I covered it all.
Thank you for the update, Councillor Duncan. Are there any questions for our liaison? Not seeing any. Thank you again. And we'll turn to the next item. We're going to continue with staff reports now.
Point of order. Can we take a 5-minute recess, please?
Yes, let's take a recess till 7:45, please. Okay, we'll now reconvene at 7:45, and we're going on into staff reports. Turning to item 13B, I'll turn to our Manager of Communications, Ms. Judson, to introduce the 2024 Annual Municipal Report, please.
Thank you for considering the 2024 annual report. As usual, the report includes some different components, including a progress report on the town's strategic plan, departmental highlights from 2024, as well as some future initiatives planned for the next year or two, and then, of course, the detailed financial statements. The annual report's been available for public review and feedback for the past 2.5 weeks. We promoted this review period through 2 newspaper ads, a social media post, as well as on our website's homepage. We haven't heard any public feedback at this point, but there was a key change made to this report based on past feedback. On page 19, we provided an overview of 7 community plans, and then we used colored icons in the departmental updates to demonstrate when actions listed in these plans have taken place or will be taking place. And the idea there is that community members can get a sense of how these plans are being implemented. And I appreciate your time on this.
Thank you. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and just an overall comment, like, great, easy to follow, and I really appreciate the departmental updates. I think it shows the vast array of what our town does for the community, and just how incredibly busy our staff is during the year, and why we as councillors have to be cognizant of the fact that we shouldn't bring too many new things forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll turn to questions now. We can comment after the motions on the floor.
No questions.
Councillor Novick.
I'm prepared to move that the Town of Sydney 2024 Annual Report be approved as presented.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Judson, for your presentation. I've gone through the report. I think it's very well done. I think it's clear to anybody looking at it that we have a very vibrant town, that there's a lot going on, that our staff have full plates, that they're getting things done. And I think that's what people expect. I'm very happy with how the report was presented. I think the financial information is clear, fairly easy to read, maybe not so easy to understand for a lot of people because it is complex at certain points. But for anybody who is interested, I think all the information that's needed is there. So I'm very happy to support the approval of the annual report as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duck.
I can only add, and I want to thank staff, and I think that Sydney punches above its weight, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I had a question. I loved the way you got the little markers in there for to show which master plans were being addressed by those, because I know that was kind of by community request, as people kept saying, you came up with all these plans and we want to know, are they being implemented? And we wanted to make that clear. Page 79 gets a little busy. Or I guess it's 79 in my agenda, it's 27 in the report. But I guess I can anticipate what the next question will be like, I see that you've done lots of these actions, so what percentage of the plan, like, is the plan now half done, or is it still like 5% done? Having gone through that exercise, would putting in future reports like a little, like completion bar or something for those kind of reports be feasible, or is it just that far too nebulous of a goal? Something just to kind of give people this idea of, like, we see all these things that are being done, and how far are we moving along on that plan? Is that possible?
Mr. Edwards, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll attempt to answer that question, but also look to Laura for input as well, if needed. So I think it would be quite difficult to achieve that level of reporting out. And as we've talked about before, these master plans are quite aspirational plans, and the only time they become more realistic plans is when they get approved through budget process. And so once plan gets brought, or an element of each of these plan comes forward to the budget process, and then that budget gets approved, then we can earnestly say that we're making progress to outright completion of those individual plans. So I think it could almost become a little bit of a detriment to chart that, because some of the plans may never get to full completion, which is kind of sad to say, but one would hope that we're revisiting these plans in a timely fashion. Some may require to be revisited in 5 years or 10 years, or perhaps even longer for some of them, and that we may not have achieved all of the initiatives within those plans when we're revisiting, but there'll be new projects or new initiatives that then get placed on there. So I hope that doesn't sound too sort of negative, so to speak, but I just don't think it would be worth the time and effort of reporting out on that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I really, really like this on many respects. Pictures. I like the parts about, you know, giving the highlights for the last year. Over the next couple of years, here's the following things we're going to work on, the objectives. You know, inputting the stuff on the different project plans. So I think it's in a really good format that people will find attractive and easy to go through. And I'll encourage everybody that I meet that says, where's our taxpayer dollars going, you know, to take a look at this. One thing I was thinking about, I think I brought this up last year too, is whether we might be able to have a graph or a chart. So I'm thinking specifically about fire and emergency services and like the different number of calls and things we get. Like just, and maybe there's other places where this would fit in, just so that people can see kind of the trend upward. Like we talk to taxpayers a lot about taxes are going up because our community is growing, we're having to do more of this or that. So having some idea of what those growth in demands or services are might help people understand why we're having to invest more in certain things. And I'll just echo Councillor Duncan's comment about, I know that staff think it might be kind of difficult to kind of give an idea on completion rate for those plans, but even if it was like a rough percentage, so that people know, like I recognize that they're aspirational, but I think people still expect that we provided input into the plan, the plan was developed, and we see some things that are getting done, but how much more is still to be done. And I think maybe it's a good thing for council to see as well, to see that, oh, we've been putting a lot into this kind of thing, but we haven't done so much over here. So I don't know how that would work, but I think it would be, if there was an easy way to give a rough estimation of where we are in terms of what things have been completed. Other than that, I think it's really excellent, so thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Novick for a second time.
Just a quick informational question. Is this annual report printed and bound and made available for people to take a copy home? And if so, where can one find it? I assume it's City Hall, but Town Hall, but
You beat me to it.
is it available in the library, for example, or?
Yes, we just need it to be approved, and then once it's approved, we do print it and bind it in-house because it's gotten very expensive to have these printed professionally, but yeah, we do keep a copy at the front desk for when people come in, as well as up in administration, and then everyone in council will receive one, you know, as well in their council mailbox, and there are a couple other places that we distribute the plan to, just so the records are all being kept of it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just add thanks to staff for the report, for the positive changes, particularly with regards to regional plans. And I also encourage residents, whether they're new residents and it's a way to learn about the good things that the town does, or even longtime residents to see the plans and accomplishments from the previous year and going forward. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We're next turning to item 13C. I'll turn to our Manager of Engineering, Mr. Demare, to introduce the request for Veterans Remembrance Crosswalk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is in follow-up to a February 24th, 2025 Council resolution for staff to report back on a proposal from the Royal Canadian Legion's request for a Remembrance Crosswalk in Sydney. To show continued support for veterans, the Legion proposed a red and white crosswalk and signs be considered in the vicinity of the cenotaph. An example of the crosswalk and signs from other municipalities, which are similar as that proposed for Sydney, is illustrated in the report. 2 sites are identified in the report for the Legion's proposal for a Remembrance Crosswalk. The first site is at Sydney Avenue and 4th Street intersection. Staff would recommend retrofitting the existing east side crosswalk. This location is near the cenotaph and the Legion's Sydney branch location. The second site is Bevan Avenue at 7th Street at the entrance to the Mary Winspear Centre and near the adjacent War Memorial. The Legion has noted their preferred location is as near the cenotaph. If approved, the cost of marking the crosswalk using standard road marking paint and installation of signs is estimated to be in the range of about $1,500, which can be accommodated under the existing operations budget. Going forward, the road markings would need to be renewed annually at a cost of $700 to $1,000. Considering the various factors in the Legion's preference, staff would support option 1, locating a Remembrance Crosswalk at Sydney Avenue and 4th Street. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the introduction. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions to begin. Councillor Duck.
I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Let's see if there are any questions, and then I'll ask for someone to move the recommendation. Go ahead, Councillor.
So I'll move the recommendation that staff be directed to work with the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 37 to establish a Remembrance Crosswalk funded from annual operating budgets with identifying signs at Sydney Avenue and 4th Street intersection at the existing east side crosswalk.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers. Any discussion?
I just want to add that I think this is a great addition to Sydney, and I think the location is perfect, given the cenotaph and the Legion, the ANF building close by. I think it's a good thing to bring to Sydney, and certainly given the gatherings we have there on Remembrance Day, I think it'll be well represented to have it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add my thank you to the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 37, and in particular Mr. Podmore for bringing this forward to us. And as my colleague stated, I think this is a welcome addition to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We're next turning to item 13D. I do see Mr. Hissick online, so I may turn to Mr. Hissick, our Director of Finance, to introduce the Crown lease renewal for parking lot 8. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
So the Crown lease for the 2 parcels of land at Sydney and at Second and Bevan, which have been in long-term use as town parking lot A, expired about 8 years ago. It's taken some time for the province to get us the renewal, but it is before us. They can offer us a 5-year renewal at this time, and it's likely to go in 5-year increments at this point if it gets extended again. While this lease might seem a little more complex than what is required for our simple use as a parking lot, it is the provincial template, and I've reviewed it and I have no concerns. The rent is $1 for the term, but there is a $200 processing fee. Recommendation is that the Crown lease be renewed for 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Novick?
I'm prepared to move the recommendation that the Crown lease for the lands utilized as town parking lot A be renewed for an additional 5-year term.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers.
Nothing to add?
Just a question as to the processing fee. Is that paid by the town, or is that paid, I just wonder who pays that processing fee?
The town has to pay it for every crown lease that's renewed.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Isick. Turning to item 13E, I'll turn to our Director of Engineering, Ms. Clary, to introduce the Sydney Street Market additional risk mitigation cost, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a result of the tragic incident that occurred at the Lapu Lapu Festival in Vancouver earlier this year, security protocols for on-street events are being reviewed. For events in Sydney, municipal fleet vehicles are now required at road closure points instead of the previously approved wooden barricades. This also requires additional town staff to be available on site to move the vehicles in case of emergency. If fleet vehicles continue to be charged to event organizers at the established rates, including the Sydney Street Market, it would likely make these events economically unfeasible. Staff are therefore recommending that moving forward for all events, not just the street market, that if fleet vehicles are required as a result of a risk assessment, that the vehicle be provided in kind by the town. These vehicles would otherwise be parked at our public works yard, so there would be no net additional cost to the town, although there are minor incidentals, slight wear and tear from traveling within Sydney and slight gas usage, not a very large cost. As a result of the additional staff required on site, event organizers may incur additional town costs this year. For the street market specifically, these charges have come too late for them to adjust their vendor fees. Starting in January, or they have to start planning in January and booking their fees, as we heard earlier this evening, booking all their vendors, and they set their fees very early in the process. Staff are therefore recommending that the 3% materials charge and 15% administration fee that's typically required in the from the town's miscellaneous fees bylaw be waived for the 2025 market season. Other event organizers have not yet come forward to ask for that similar waiver, but that may come forward for other large street events, and we will bring it forward at that time if required. Staff recommend that these additional fees be included for the street market in future years, because the market organizer will have time to adjust their fees for the 2026 and onward seasons, so they'll know what to expect moving forward. Lastly, if the town does intend to continue to have major events within street footprints, we should look at a more sustainable long-term option for closing these streets. There are some barrier systems available, and one of the recommendations in this report is that staff review and report back to council on some options. This would be kind of a longer-term thing. It would come in the next few years or couple years, a recommendation. It wouldn't be coming through the 2026 budget process, but it would be something that staff would continue to review and look into moving forward. And I'm here if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to colleagues. First, Councillor Duck, then Councillor Gurnett.
Yes, just to the staff, you raised the question, or raised the point that not all events have come forward to request this. I'm just trying to clarify, is it a requirement now that they have to have this because of the security? So why are we not hearing from them, or is there, am I missing a gap there?
Through to Councillor Duck, not all events have had their meeting yet. So all event organizers have a meeting approximately, for large events, it's approximately four weeks before the event actually occurs, and that's with the RCMP, Town Fire Department, and other key town staff. And at that event, that's where the risk is reviewed and mitigation measures are decided upon.
So it would be a requirement for them to put in this risk management?
Most likely, the RCMP will require a municipal fleet vehicle when a road closure is in place. Some events may adjust their processes and not require road closure. For example, there's some events that use Beacon Park and also the Causeway, and some of those events could just move their whole practice onto Beacon Park, and then this wouldn't be a requirement for them. So we'd have to play it by ear on a case-by-case basis.
That's a great point you raised there, Ms. Clary. So if the event is put into Beacon Hill Park, is there no risk mitigation that somebody can't drive off of Beacon South and drive into the lawns?
At this point, we understand the risk is for road closures, so that is the direction we're moving forward with.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and I think the question's pretty much Councillor Doug asked, but I was along the same lines, wondering about, through you to staff, Mayor, the Torque Masters, given that we've already given approval for them to carry out their event, but so that's something that would be approached when they get to the final stages, and they may approach council with a similar request.
To the Councillor Garnett, that is a potential, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rintoul and Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, staff. First off, we had this conversation when the bike race was looking to use a portion of the town center for this purpose, and I think that particular well-experienced event organizer had addressed how they were going to look to mitigate these concerns. I really appreciate staff being proactive and bringing this forward. I think it's very important. There's a note in here, Ms. Clary, in your report, the provincial government has established a commission looking to publish its report, likely late June, which is almost upon us. Do we envision that perhaps this is best captured in due course in policy based on the guidelines the commission sets out?
Through to Councillor Rintoul, I don't think we know yet what the province is going to publish. They have reached out to municipalities to get feedback on events, and they have said they are going to be publishing a report. And when it's available, we'll have to review it and decide how it can be incorporated into the town's policies or procedures moving forward.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Novak, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the report, Ms. Clary. I'm wondering, I have seen town vehicles blocking off Beacon Street at 5th and at other side streets from time to time, both at Street Market and at other events. Historically, have the event organizers always paid the fees that you describe in your report for those vehicles, or are those just happenstance?
Through to Councillor Novak, so the report does mention the parades, which are handled differently. The town supports these financially. They're organized by Peninsula Celebration Society. So during the parades, town vehicles are parked at all the different cross streets. For the market in particular, there was a previous risk assessment requirement to have a town vehicle parked at Beacon and 5th. The risk of that was if someone had a medical emergency driving down 5th, they could be driving quite fast and be unaware or unable to stop before the market. So that was a vehicle that was charged previously to the market operator based on the town's rates and our miscellaneous fees and charges bylaw.
So historically, if there have been vehicles there, they've been charged both the equipment rate and the labor rate to the event organizers.
Correct.
I guess my concern here is that these types of charges, in spite of the fact that we'll absorb some of the costs in kind, could make some events unfeasible in the town. So I'm wondering if you've given thought to any other risk mitigation programs that might be less costly in the long run, or is this just an interim measure?
Through to Councillor Novak, so the last recommendation in the report is that staff review potential alternate barricades for on-street events. And another alternate is that event organizers choose to hold their events elsewhere and not close a street for their events. So there are kind of those two longer-term options that council could look for in the future, but the current staff recommendation is that we look for potential longer-term barricades.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. A question through you to staff. As these different groups come forward, like say the Torque Masters who don't know about this yet, would there be an option for them to provide their own barricades if they say we don't want to pay that cost, but we will designate our own vehicles and our own people to do that at whatever locations are determined. Is that something that we would consider as an alternative?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, the RCMP has been pretty consistent that they would prefer town vehicles in place for these barricades at this time. Things may evolve over time, or as we see the provincial's report, things may evolve, but at this time, it will likely require town municipal vehicles, and then have someone available on site that can move those vehicles quickly in the case of an emergency.
Right. Okay, yep, that's all, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll look to a mover. Councillor?
Sure.
You can move all four recommendations, please.
Okay, the first one will be modified slightly based on a recommendation this afternoon by staff, and I believe Ms. Nelson has that. So number one, that for events in Sydney, municipal vehicle barricades required as a result of a risk assessment be provided in kind and not charged to the event organizer. But any municipal labor associated with these barricades be charged to the event organizer in accordance with miscellaneous fee bylaw number 1711. Number two, that for the 2025 market season, the town waive the additional 3% materials surcharge and 15% administrative fee for costs associated with the street market. Number three, that for 2026 and following market seasons, all other costs associated with the street market be charged in accordance with miscellaneous fee bylaw number 1711 as amended from time to time. And finally, number four, that staff be directed to research alternative barricades to close streets for events in Sydney and bring forward options for council's consideration as time and priorities permit.
Second.
We haven't moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers, please.
Nothing more to add.
Any further discussion? Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mayor. I have some concerns about this. I worry that risk mitigation notwithstanding, and of course I'm certainly all for minimizing risk to the public in this case. The wording here says that for events in Sydney, municipal barricades required, et cetera, that's kind of open-ended. There's no ending date. This is not just a temporary situation until we come up with a permanent barricade policy or alternative. I'm concerned that these additional costs will discourage events from situating in downtown Sydney. These events are good for Sydney. They're not just good for market organizers or for operators like Torque Masters, et cetera. These things are good for the town. They help to bring traffic to the municipality. They help the merchants. They bring commerce. I think the benefits to the town outweigh the costs of absorbing the risk mitigation charges for these street events. It's my thought that perhaps the town should absorb these events until we, or absorb these costs rather, until we come up with a permanent solution. So at this point, I'm not prepared to support this motion. I think it's kind of a blunt instrument. It doesn't have an end date on it, except for item 2. So I just feel that perhaps we're being a little too reactive. I acknowledge that the Lapu Lapu Festival was indeed a tragedy. We don't know if many of those casualties could have been prevented with this type of vehicle barricade. Maybe some could have been prevented, but perhaps not all. So I don't know. I'm not happy with this the way it's written. I think there are better options, and I would, you know, I like Article number 4. I wish we had split these out. I don't know if we can do that as a motion arising, but perhaps not if this carries anyway. But I thought I should just register my objection to at least the first part of this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. So two things. One is you've requested to separate, and I will separate. And so is your request to consider the first 3 and separate number 4?
I think that
Your microphone, Councillor.
Sorry, I think that would work, because the first 3 are kind of married together, so I think it makes sense to keep them together, but item 4 is kind of separate.
Okay, so I'll now consider that we're now considering the first 3 recommendations as a block. And my second thing I'll share is that within those 3, you suggested that there are other approaches or you do have the option to amend if you have other considerations.
Well, I would amend this by saying that I would like the town to absorb costs associated with risk mitigation strategies until a full staff report comes back to council on alternative barricades or other risk mitigation strategies that could be looked at on a permanent basis.
So I'm trying to be helpful. I'm not advocating, but in terms of what I'm hearing is that the first recommendation would be amended that for events in city, municipal vehicle barricades required as a result of a risk assessment be provided in kind, and all other costs not charged to the event organizer. That's your intent?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'll take that as an amendment, and you would then strike number 2 and 3 as part of your amendment, given the changes you want to make to the number 1?
I guess number 1 is basically fine since it's going to be provided in kind, and the waiving of the other fees is also fine because it's not being charged back to
that's only for 2025.
Okay.
For the market.
Point of order.
Go ahead.
If I may.
I'll consider your point of order.
No, I'm just, in regards to the proposed amendment, it sounds like what's being proposed is exactly the opposite to what the motion is proposing, which, so I don't know if that's appropriate or not. The motion has been made to cover those costs, and then the opportunity to debate whether to cover them or not will be provided in the debate on that motion, is my understanding.
Thank you. I'll acknowledge your point of order and agree with you. And so, Councillor Novick, I will not accept the amendment because it is too significantly changing the intent of the motion. So you would have to vote in opposition if it were not to pass. You could come with a motion arising.
Okay, well, if I still have the floor, then I'll say that I would, what I would do is that I would accept recommendation number 1. I would accept recommendation number 2. I would not accept, I would vote against recommendation number 3, and I would accept recommendation number 4. So
okay, so I'm going to split them differently now. I'm going to split them into 4 separate recommendations. And so we have number 1 on the floor. Is there any further discussion on number 1? Councillor Rintoul.
I'm opposed to you splitting this. I think as chair, it's your, my understanding through the corporate officer would be that yes, when one member of council makes this request, that's what we do. I think we're accommodating a prolonged discussion on this.
Okay, so I'm taking it as a point, I'll take that as a point of order, Councillor, and I'll rule, I won't accept the point of order, because if a councillor indicates there's a multi-part motion and a councillor indicates that they're in support of one part of the motion but not another part, it's reasonable to separate the motion. If you wish to challenge the chair, and I don't take it personally, we would take splitting of the motion to a vote.
Yeah, I'm not going to go down that route. I don't know what I'm speaking to at this point, except to say, to my colleagues giving this consideration, that if I were an event organizer closing a street in British Columbia or anywhere in the free world, I would be delighted to see that there's some clarity here so that I know what to expect to protect my event and my liability to hosting such an event. So I find it a little frustrating that we're having to go through these one by one, but I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you for your motivation. Any further discussion on number 1? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Is there any further discussion on number 2? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion carries. We're not any further discussion on number 3. Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Novick is opposed. The motion carries. Number 4. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We're next going to item 13F. I'll turn to our Fire Chief, Mr. Mickelson, to introduce the 2025 UBCM Next Generation 911 grant, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Staff are seeking Council support for a funding application under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. These funds will be utilized to purchase new mobile data terminals better suited to interface with upcoming next generation 911 technologies, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, do we have a mover? Councillor Rintoul.
With the recommendation, the Council endorse the grant application to the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund under the Next Generation 911 funding stream for the purchase of new mobile data terminals.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Nothing further for me.
Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And turning to item 13G, I'll turn back to Mr. Hissick or Ms. Chen to introduce the financial plan vehicle amendment for vehicle replacement.
I can do that.
Okay, Chief Mickelson.
Sure, no worries. Yeah, again, the intent is to obtain authorization to advance the purchase of a replacement vehicle in the 2025 budget in order to avoid the cost of extensive repairs to an older vehicle, and I'd be happy again to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll first turn to Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Chief Mickelson. Just wondering, when in discussions with local dealers, is there any indication that the vehicle you currently drive will have any kind of trade-in value that can offset costs?
I kind of doubt it. It has 12,000 miles on it, and it's basically been diagnosed with a terminal engine fault. So we will probably do our best to take all the lights, console, and emergency signaling equipment off, which is still can be repurposed. And then if obviously there is any use or we can yield any funds out of selling it to a dealer, we would. Otherwise, I probably have 30 inspired individuals who would be happy to cut it up for me on a practice night.
If I may.
Were you looking for some tires?
No. Thank you anyways, though. So I'm just thinking about the federal EV rebate. I'm not sure about the provincial one, but I know they were on a bit of a pause. And I think I read a couple weeks ago they're bringing it back in some form. I'm not sure when. So in terms of the fact that vehicle being on life support, is there a way to stretch it out till the EV rebates come back, or do you think that this is kind of an imminent decision that needs to be made and done pretty quickly?
I believe the life expectancy is pretty difficult to forecast. I'm driving it right now, but we do have some alternative plans in the event it passes away sooner than we hope. But it's my understanding, I just received a few quotes from dealers, and there was a $4,000 rebate for EVs that were applied to the recent quotes I just received today. I haven't had a chance to go through those in detail. But those were on the quotes I received today.
Great, thank you. And the only other question I would have is with regards to the fire vehicle replacement fund. And it's not a fund, I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my replacement reserve. I realize it's only approximately $35,000 if we're using $50,000 from the climate fund. but do we have any concerns going forward with future purchases, given where the account currently stands?
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, speaking with Mr. Hissick, it is not uncommon to actually be in a deficit position depending on where we are in the cycle, based on large capital replacements. When you're purchasing, 1.2 and 1.1 million dollar vehicles, sometimes you do dip into the red at times. But again, our vehicle replacement budget has been augmented in recent times, but I think we'll continue to need to do that as the environment, the vehicles are just getting more and more expensive, but I'm not overly concerned at this time.
Thank you. I'll turn to Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm quite happy with Chief Mickelson's response. I don't need to add anything there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gurnett. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to staff. I really like the idea of an all-electric vehicle, but my question is, for an electric vehicle such as that, a level 3 charger would probably be indicated. And my question is, does the budgeting here take into account the cost of a level 3 charger, or is there already a level 3 charger equipped at the CSB?
Through the mayor to Councillor Novick, we have a level 2 charger already that supports our one existing EV, and that seems to provide ample charging capacity for our existing EV, the one in the fleet, and where there is provision to add some additional EV charging infrastructure from the Climate Action Fund that's already been in place. So I don't foresee any issues with the existing level 2 infrastructure that we have in place or are planning to put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duck.
I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Go ahead.
I so move that, number one, the financial plan be amended to advance the purchase of a replacement vehicle for the fire chief from 2028 to 2025, and two, that funding for the $85,000 vehicle purchase include $50,000 from the LGCAP, with the remainder from the fire vehicle replacement reserve.
Second.
We haven't moved and seconded. Any motivation?
Nothing to add.
Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll just note that as we're aware, and the Chief's referenced in his report, just the increased volume of use of these vehicles as first responders assisting BC Ambulance Service. Not surprising that we're going to see this type of wear and tear on vehicles in an expedited rate, and so it's something for us to be cognizant of and ensure that we're providing first responders with reliable equipment. So happy to support this, as I know my colleagues will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Returning to item 13H, and I'll turn to staff to introduce the 2024 Statement of Financial Information, also known as SOFI. Ms. Jen, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Statement of Financial Information, or SOFI, is a routine report we prepare annually. It must be approved by council and submitted to the province by June 30th each year. The SOFI is prepared in accordance with the Financial Information Act, which specifies the information that must be included and how that information is to be presented. The accompanying staff report provides some descriptions and context for the tables and schedules that form part of the SOFI. And I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. I'll turn to colleagues. Are there any questions of the SOFI report? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover. Councillor Novick.
I'm happy to move that the Statement of Financial Information for the year ended December 31st, 2024 be approved.
Second.
Moved and second. I'll turn to the movers. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous as well. Thank you. We have the monthly building report for the month of May. As item 13I, there is no recommendation. It's for information. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll turn to, we are receiving the 7 items under correspondence for information. There isn't a motion required there. We have no notices of motion or motion to go in camera this evening. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Everyone's in favor. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.